Okay, I have a very, very short amount of time, but I have a lot of things I want to show you. Okay. Oh. I'm going to rush a little bit, but if I can't show you everything, then that's okay. Maybe I'll come back for another half an hour later. So last time, what did we talk about? Materiality of books, how it evolved over time. We talked about different modes of reading. What else did we talk about? Content navigation, we talked about. I'm going to just do a brief recap. So the title today is Design for Reading, Typography as Interface. So I would argue with this lecture that typography has always been for navigating is an interface between language and reader. Okay? Recap. Last time we talked about 3 different modes of reading. Receptive means immersing in the text. But okay, okay. Receptive is where you immerse in a body of text, in a story usually. You read in a linear way. Selective is when you select what's most relevant to you, find things strategically. For example, a textbook. Fragmented reading is, if you imagine news feeds, like in Facebook and Twitter. So this is immersive or linear reading. This is selective or strategic reading. And this is fragmented reading. We talked about formats or the materiality, the constraints that has to do with that. We talked about constraints that came from production, constraints that comes from consumption. We talked about navigational elements, so this has to do a lot to do with typography. We talked about genres. Remember, I had an exercise for you, but you probably haven't done it. But think about that. You can recognize the genre by not just the content, but also by the look of it, the access structure of it. You know this is a newspaper, you know this is a novel, because you know the pattern that you find things or read things in these genres. So these are the things that contribute to genres. This is in content structure, this is in the way you access the information. This is the constraint that has to do with the materiality of the genre. A combination of all 3 indicates the genre. So from this framework, I want to introduce you to something else this time. A possible process of reading. You need to choose what to read. You either read it immersively for sustained amounts of time, or you look something up specifically, and then you read a small chunk of the information. And then in that process, you might want to annotate. That means adding notes to what you're reading, highlighting things, marking certain pages, extracting the content, or sharing it. So it doesn't matter whether it's print, it doesn't matter whether it's print or screen or whatever, you do all these things. So this is, of course, is receptive reading, immersive reading. This is more selective reading. So this is a process that people possibly take when they read something. Okay, so from the materiality last time we talked about, we need to be aware of the resolution. Okay, so for example, a laptop screen is relatively low res, 72 dpi is pretty typical. Resolution from print is much higher. So whether it's HD or whatever, Retina, we are still working with a much higher resolution for print. So that affects how you design things with typography. And format, so size and resolution, from a mobile device that's maybe 3.5 inches diagonal to a large format broadsheet newspaper. How do you shape the attentions of the readers? Very different for these different environments. When resolution is low, you can only display very few things at once. Yeah. You have to maximize the page or the screen for content rather than navigation. You cannot clutter the screen with navigation. So if you want to do navigation, you need to do hide and reveal, or sliding panels, or things like that, to hide the stuff that people need to navigate between content. You need a very simple and uncluttered layout. So you can't take a print newspaper and shrink it down to a 3.5 diagonal mobile screen. It does not work. So you have to design specifically for that. So when it's high resolution, you can display many things at the same time. You can use areas and designate them for navigation purposes, right? You can designate areas for different content types. You can have a much more complex layout because you can hold it really close and it's very high resolution. And you can have multiple entry or exit points to the content, right? For example, a newspaper. So the way you make choices and the way you consume the content is very different because the resolution is different, because the size is different, okay? So one size doesn't fit all. That's very important. Okay. I just did a little analysis. If you're working with desktop or laptop computer, your viewing distance is quite far. Like this is the distance that you're working at, right? When you're looking at a laptop. You don't do this, right? You don't hold it like this. You can't take it to bed with you, right? You're sitting at a desk, you're sitting with a computer on your lap, maybe. You're working with a resolution of 72 to 227 dpi. If you think about this dpi, 227, even the printers, the very early laser printers, let's say in 1985, the very first laser printers, were 300 dpi. This is extremely low, especially when you're looking at so far, right? So things need to be bigger if you're designing for desktop or laptop computers. Yeah. Physical dimensions. I have this here as well. Tablet, you can hold it closer. Mobile, you can hold it even closer. If we're looking at laser print, typically now it's 600 dpi to 1200 dpi. If you're looking at offset printed material, it's 2500 dpi. Look at how much higher the resolution is compared to this one. So you can have incredible detail with offset print or even laser print, but you cannot for the other media. You need to zoom in. You need to do other things if you want to look at things at a much more detailed way. Right? So design always for your viewports, for your substrates. Okay. Okay. So last time we talked about content navigation, right? This time we keep on looking at content, and from that point of view, we look at typography of how people access content. Okay. We're going to look at content and access structures. So if you read a book, actually, it's pretty linear. Because the pages are organized in a very linear way, although the content structure might not be linear. So you look at one thing after another. So that's a linear sequential order. But in fact, you can pick up a book and flip to any page you want and jump between them. But the substrate itself, the materiality of this format, promotes a linear sequence, right? But more often than not, the structure of your content is a nested structure. It's hierarchical, right? That means you're grouping things into categories, from big categories to smaller subcategories, right? So there's a level. There are levels of importance here. Parent-child relationships, right? Most publications structure contents like that in a nested structure. Okay. So this is a linear structure. I'm showing you a linear structure right now with my slides. I can go back, right? But pretty much it's linear. I control it. And if you have an outliner, you can organize your content in a hierarchical format. So you need to plan your content based on this kind of a hierarchical structure. So in a table of contents, that's how you see an overview of this nested structure usually. This one has a numerical hierarchical system. Code, the hierarchy, right? Usually don't it. Okay. I'll show you this first. What's the problem here? really, there's no way for the reader to understand how to access this content, basically. That's why I said typography is an interface, right? There's no way for people to understand how I should approach this content, what I'm looking at, unless you go and read it from beginning to end. So it's a perception problem. People think that it looks very difficult to understand, or understanding what it's about before getting into the content. Findability reasons, it's very difficult to look for something. Comprehensibility, of course, is very difficult to understand things. So you need to provide an access structure for your reader through typography. That's the most important aim before you talk about anything about the aesthetics of how the text looks. Okay, and you recognize what it is. So with a clear access structure, you can quickly pick up on what genre is this publication, how to read this, how to find things, how to understand something with a clear access structure. Okay. Actually, I need to go back. So basically, how do we read something? We don't read every detail. We try to scan our environment, to scan a page, and look for meaningful patterns. So with our fixations and movements, we move very quickly with our eyeballs. So we scan things. So you need to provide signposts, for example, headings, for example, big images, for example, bold type, to help people access the content. Okay. So alignments is a very good way to create a clear access.